The non-con schedule is essentially over, so what kind of shape are the Tar Heels in heading into the rest of the season? It's time for a State of the Union.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Tuesday, December 24th, 2024. Happy Christmas Eve to all of you. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, and you're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I want to welcome in all the everydayers, all the Locked On Tar Heels insiders, and of course, our Locked On Tar Heels Discord family. It's great to be together. Let's get right after it. Today, basically what I wanted to do here on Christmas Eve is take stock of where things are at. Basically have a State of the Union address as we get ready to wrap up non-con play. I see you, Campbell. I know you're still coming, but really, let's look ahead to ACC play. We're going to dream a little bit because it's Christmas Eve and everyone's dreaming of sugar plums dancing in their heads. And then I want to share something that I'm thankful for. Carolina's heightened bench usage and production this season. Going to be a fun show talking through all that. Let's get right into it after I tell you about Trivia Tuesday. That's right. You know we do this just about every single week. RJ Davis is just about to become the all-time Carolina leader in made three-pointers, surpassing Marcus Page 5 when he makes two more. So my question to you is, those guys are number 1 and 2 on the all-time list. Who are numbers 3 through 10? That's right. I want the all-time top 10 in terms of three-pointers at Carolina. The answer for that coming up at the end of the show. Can't wait to hear how many of them you come up with. All right. Here we go. State of the Union. The non-conference schedule is basically over. North Carolina overall is 7-5. Remember, one of those wins is a conference game over Georgia Tech. So in non-con play, Carolina is 6-5 and do have one more game in the non-con slate before we get to ACC play. That's Campbell coming up on Sunday. On Friday's show, we'll get ready for that one. That's going to be a blast. But so 6-5 in non-conference play. Carolina, newest AP poll came out on Monday. Tar Heels are not ranked, as you would guess. I think if they had beaten Florida, in addition to UCLA, I don't know that they would have hopped back in, but they would have been really, really close to it. They were in others receiving votes, basically 37th if you count all the teams out past it. But here's what's interesting to me. Gary Parrish, who writes for CBS Sports, does a great podcast on college basketball at the national level. I'm always going to try to send you to Locked On College Basketball because that's us and that's the show that I host in addition to this one. But he does a great job with that. So I do want to mention that. But one of the things GP does every day is puts out a top 25 in one, literally every day, basically a top 25 poll plus one. So it's 26 teams. And this is 7 days a week. So on Sunday morning, following the UCLA win, he talked about Carolina recognizing, hey, look, I see what these losses are, right? I recognize what Carolina has done. And he actually went ahead and put Carolina back into his poll at 26th, but still, like, there are national media members that are seeing the difficulty of Carolina's schedule. Now, you and I know there's a ton to be worked on and fixed, but it's good to see that other people recognize that it's not just 7-5. It's 7-5 with losses to some of the very best teams that are out there. As for the net, it's ongoing now. We get a refresh every day. Ken Palm refreshes basically after every game. The net refreshes overnight for the next day. After the UCLA win, I don't know if you noticed this or not, Carolina had been 46th in the net actually for a couple days in a row. They jumped 13 spots after that win all the way to 33rd. On Monday, as I record this, they're 34th, so fell one spot. Not anything of their own, just other teams' movement from Sunday. And being 33rd and now 34th is Carolina's best ranking since the Alabama loss. They were in the low 20s at that point. So that's encouraging. As for how Carolina is doing in the 4 quadrants, they've played 7 quad 1 games, 2 and 5 right now in that metric. The wins are Dayton and obviously UCLA, and then the 5 losses are the 5 losses. No quad 2 games. Isn't that interesting? Carolina will obviously pick up quite a few of those in ACC play, 3-0 in quad 3 games, 2-0 in quad 4 games. So, again, thankfully, all the losses are quad 1. If you're going to win, you want them to be, if you're going to lose, you want them to be quad 1 losses, right? That makes sense. But also, at some point, we have to say, hey, it's good that all of the losses are in quad 1, but there are all the losses. You know what I mean? Like, that stacks up. But here's, again, the good news about the losses. With the new AP poll refresh on Monday, Carolina's losses now look even better. Here to the teams ranked 2nd, Auburn, 5th, Alabama, 6th, Florida, 7th, Kansas. So Carolina has lost to 2, 5, 6, and 7, and then Michigan State, which jumped to 18. So all 5 losses are to teams in the top 18 of the AP poll. And again, you don't want to lose those games. But if you are, that's not a bad way to do it. And all of this means with the Dayton and UCLA wins being so important, we got to be massive Dayton and UCLA fans the rest of this season. So cheer them on. And frankly, those 5 games that Carolina lost, like, you want Auburn to be great. You want Alabama to be great, and Florida and Kansas and Michigan State. As painful as that can be, that's part of what you got to do when you take on losses, is cheer for the teams that beat you. All right, there we go. At KenPom right now, Carolina is 28th. At Torvik, they are 33rd. So, pretty consistent that Carolina's floating anywhere from like 26 to 33, 34 in a lot of polls. And that's both the predictive metrics and the results resume-based stuff as well. So that's good to know. Now, the big question as we think State of the Union, where do things stand from an NCAA tournament standpoint? Because I think some people are probably freaking out because North Carolina has lost 5 games and like, oh, the sky's falling, we're not going to make the NCAA tournament. Others recognize probably that it's like, yes, 5 losses, but against 5 teams that are, 4 of them are probably a 1 or 2 seed. And one of them, Michigan State right now, is probably a 4 seed, right? So all 5 losses are to a top 4 seed. At Torvik, on Bart Torvik's site, it does like a projection, like a percentage projection that you'll make the NCAA tournament. Carolina's is at 75% right now. And so that, I think that's a good understanding of like, you're kind of smack dab between, you wish it was stronger, but 75% is pretty strong based on probably how some people are feeling about things right now. And Torvik projects Carolina's seed right now at a 7.7. So somewhere from a 7 to 8. At Bracket Matrix, which is a website that combines all of the bracketology out there and takes an average and does all that, Carolina is a 9 seed right now. The last 9 seed, but a 9 seed. And there are 33 brackets that Bracket Matrix uses. Carolina, I guess I should say, is not in 8 of them, but they are in 25 of them. But you should know that the majority of those brackets have not yet refreshed since the UCLA win. So very curious to see what that looks like after that. In terms of Joe Lunardi's bracketology, I think he's the person people look at most. Right now, his refresh is just every Tuesday. So the last time it refreshed, Carolina hadn't played Florida or UCLA yet. And as I record today on Monday, it hasn't refreshed since that win and that loss. So you look today on Tuesday, because usually it's mid-morning when he puts his new bracketology out. I would guess Carolina was a 9 in the last bracketology. That was, again, before the Florida loss. I would guess they're probably around that same spot when it comes out today on ESPN, probably 7, 8, or 9. I would be looking in that range. So keep your eyes on that. As for KenPom, when you start to think about, okay, that's where we're at now, like a 7, 8, 9 seed. What do you got to do the rest of the way? What, how is, I want to specifically answer that, like what needs to happen to make the NCAA tournament, but I also want to look at what is ahead in terms of Carolina's remaining 20 games, because you've got Campbell, 1 non-con game, and then 19 ACC games, 10 on the road, 9 at home, because Carolina has already played an ACC game at home. At KenPom, basically one of the things it does is gives a projection of every game, like a percentage chance that you're going to win or lose, and a predicted score of the game. At KenPom, Carolina is favored in 16 of those 20 remaining games. The losses are at Pitt, at Duke, at Clemson versus Duke. Obviously, this is just a projection. They change as teams change throughout the year. And then the total remaining projection at KenPom, because it's one thing to say, all right, Carolina is favored in 16 of their final 20 games, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win 16 and lose 4. It could be slightly better or slightly worse. So Ken Palm's overall remaining projection for Carolina is to go 14-6, which would mean a 21-11 regular season record. Does that make sense? Similarly, Torvik does the same thing. They favor Carolina at Torvik in 14 of the 20 remaining games. The losses are the same as the Ken Palm ones, adding in at Louisville, which is the game on New Year's Day. So it's 2 games away from now, and the game at Florida State. So Carolina favored in every home game other than Duke, and then underdogs at Torvik in 5 of the 10 road games. And the total remaining projection at Torvik is 13-7, giving Carolina a 20-12 overall record in the regular season and 13-7 ACC record. And here's something else I want to remind us of as we talk about how strong Carolina's schedule has been, both the wins and the losses, right? Like played very, very high level. Like if you're thinking, man, it feels like this is otherworldly more difficult than usual. You're absolutely right. Strength of schedule, it matters. Like you hear the selection committee talk about that at the end. Like we left last year when Carolina, a lot of people were like, is Carolina or Iowa State going to be the 1 seed? It was Carolina. And one of the things I talked about with Iowa State was how weak their non-conference strength of schedule is. You look at Carolina, they were 5th in non-conference strength of schedule at Ken Palm on Saturday after the win. They moved up on Sunday, Carolina moved up to 3rd in non-con strength of schedule at Ken Palm, behind only Florida A&M, who is 350th at Ken Palm, and Mississippi Valley State, who's literally the last team in the nation at Ken Palm. So Carolina, their strength of schedule is better than everyone other than 2 of the bottom 15 teams because they had to play a bunch of great teams. That is incredible, and it's going to hold water. Carolina just can't take on too much water and capsize their boat, if you'll allow me that analogy as things go on. And by the way, at the Nets non-con strength of schedule, which is what really, really, really matters, Carolina is 2nd in non-con strength of schedule. So what needs to happen to make the NCAA tournament going forward? 4 very quick things. Number 1, don't lose, right? I mean, if we're being honest, go 20-0. That's not going to happen. That wouldn't happen for any team probably, but don't lose. But number 2, if you are going to lose, you need to lose the quote right games. And what I mean by that is if you're going to lose, similar to the games Carolina has already lost, they need to be quad 1 games like Duke. You don't want to lose to Duke, but if you are going to lose, that's an acceptable game to lose. Maybe some quad 2 as well, but you just have to hold serve in quad 3 and quad 4 games because of the number of losses in non-con. If you start taking on quad 3 and quad 4 losses, that's not going to bode well for the Tar Heels. That loss at Georgia Tech last year was a big thorn in their side on the resume. Thankfully, it didn't do too bad. Number 3, beat Campbell, right? Like we can't look past that as you think ahead. Yes, ACC schedule is looming. You got to take care of Campbell, who on paper is the worst team you will play all season long, but got to play the game. And that would allow Carolina to finish 9-3 in non-con play, plus the win over Georgia Tech for a total record of 10-13 going into the main chunk of ACC play. And then 4th, what needs to happen to make the NCAA tournament? Carolina hasn't yet showed this level of consistency, but I would say 15-5 in ACC play is a good target. A little bit more, or a little bit less, I think you'd be fine. I mean, obviously, if more, you're going to be fine. But I think 15-5 is the number to shoot for me, and that would be incredible. Why so? In the time since the ACC has gone to a 20-game schedule, which this is the 5th season of it. It's the 6th season in total, but the season after COVID, they didn't play 20 games. Here's the team that finished first in the regular season, their record in each of those previous 4 seasons: 17-3, 15-5, 16-4, 16-4. So hovering right around in there is where Carolina wants to be. But here's even more interesting. 2nd place, literally all 4 seasons, has been 15-5. One of those, it was tied for first, so it's technically a second team as well. But if Carolina can get to 15-5, history suggests that would give them 2nd place in the ACC. You would have 10 regular season losses at that point. And I feel like that puts you in a great spot. Not a top 1, 2, maybe even 3 seed. But I think if you could do that, you're maybe moving into 5 seed, 6 seed range. And that would be great. All right, guys, tonight is Christmas Eve. We're all dreaming about tomorrow, Christmas Day. So let's dream about a little bit of a what if. If Carolina had won some of these games they lost, what might things have looked like? We'll play that scenario out in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, the NFL playoffs, they're almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel, man, they've got so many different ways for you to pick up a W. Here's one of them. The Fenway Bowl, the Wasabi Fenway Bowl, is coming up on Saturday. Carolina favored by 2.5 over UConn. But it's not just the line. There's all sorts of fun. They always just put out a ton of different odds and opportunities to bet at FanDuel on these games. So, for example, you can just take Carolina's over-under for total points scored. It's at 27.5. Or you could bet on the result of Carolina's first offensive drive, whether it's an offensive touchdown, a field goal attempt, that's plus 480, punt, plus 115, and any other result plus 600. Man, that's pretty cool. I love it. Get into it at FanDuel.com today to get your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Since it's Christmas Eve and, tonight we're all going to be dreaming dreams of sugar plums dancing in our head, I thought it'd be fun to just dream a little bit of a what if. I don't know about you. I often struggle in sports of I'll dwell on the what ifs ahead, but man, I so often dwell on the what ifs of behind of man, why didn't that happen? Or sometimes the bad of oh boy, I'm glad that went the way it did because that would have been really bad if it, things like that. And so obviously this season, there have been so many of those what ifs. And so my what if that I want to pose right now is how different would we feel if Carolina had won 2 of the 3 of the Kansas, Michigan State, and Florida games? And that's not some far-fetched idea. Those are all real possibilities, right? Yes, Carolina won 0 of them, but they could have easily won 1, 2, or even 3 of them if things had fallen a different way. So right now, there's your scenario. Right now, Carolina, as you know, is 7-5. Thanks to getting over the hump against UCLA. That's a what if in the other direction. If Carolina, let's say that last shot from UCLA falls and Carolina can't score, Tar Heels are 6-6 right now. And we feel quite a bit different than we do right now. Well, the losses. Let me remind you, we've already said it, but Kansas, Auburn, Alabama, Michigan State, and Florida. So for the sake of this exercise, let's call Auburn and Alabama L's, right? I think those teams are just operating differently than Carolina and almost everyone in the nation right now. And unfortunately, we prefer it when Carolina is one of that team, but they're not right now. And we just got to embrace that. Not like it, but accept it, I guess is a better word to say. But the other 3 losses, Kansas and then Michigan State and then Florida. Yes, I know there were the big deficits. I hear that. But those were games that Carolina either led late or had a chance to lead late or could have held on to and didn't. Let me remind you just in brief of some of those scenarios. At Kansas, Carolina came back from that massive deficit, led by 4 with 3 minutes and 15 seconds to go. I know it's a lot of time and you could end up still losing. They led by 2 with 1:50 left. They missed a couple shots from a 3 from both Jae'lyns that could have allowed Carolina to take the lead again later in this game. Michigan State, this might be the most painful one, is Carolina was down, didn't really have a lead late. They did take a lead in overtime. Thank you, Seth Trimble, for getting us there. But man, this is perhaps the biggest what if is Elliot Cadeau missing that wide open layup that gives Carolina a 1-point lead with 19 seconds to go. Against Florida, Carolina, again, similar to Kansas, came all the way back, led by 3 with 2.5 minutes to go. They led by 2 with 1:50 to go, and then simply couldn't secure a defensive rebound. Had they done that, Carolina probably wins that game. So you can very realistically see a world where Carolina is not 7-5 right now, but rather, let's say Carolina wins 2 of those 3 games. They're 9-3 right now, with only Campbell left in non-con, and then you finish non-con plus Georgia Tech at 10-3. That feels wildly different. You know what I mean? And I think of those 3, Kansas is the most beneficial of those wins, even though Florida and Well, even though just Florida out of that threesome is ranked higher right now, but winning at Allen Fieldhouse, come on, man. That, whoo, boy. And thinking about 9-3, by the way, I think I even predicted that preseason. Like, that's what I thought Carolina would have. But when you start to think about that, like break it down beyond being 9-3 if Carolina wins those games. Instead of 2-5 in quad one right now, Carolina would be 4-3 in quad one right now. And as you look at that, first off, there ain't many teams in the nation that have even played 7 quad one games going back to Carolina's strength of schedule. But do you know, or would you care to guess, how many teams in the nation right now have 4 or more quad one wins? I'll give you just a second, and then I'm going to tell you. It's 3. Literally only 3 teams have 4 or more quad one wins. Auburn is 6-1 in quad one. That's insane to me. UConn is 4-2, and Oregon is 4-1. Carolina could be in that group if they had won just 2 of those 3 other games. And in that scenario, if you're 9-3 overall right now with wins over, let's say, Kansas and Michigan State or Florida and Michigan State plus UCLA plus Dayton, come on, man. You are squarely in the tournament. And then you've got a lot of margin in your ACC schedule. That's part of the issue right now is Carolina doesn't have much room to breathe, right? They've got to get to that 15-5 or 16-4 that we just talked about a minute ago. And that's the issue. Now, they can still get there, but man, if you had won just 2 other games, if you'd hit a layup, if you'd gotten a defensive rebound, it is every little thing like that. And that's why every possession, every bounce of the ball, all of it matters. You got to be so locked in and dialed in. And I know it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but like you all hear me, right? You get it. So Carolina has a chance to continue building on that, learning from it, which they certainly have, man. They have scrapped and clawed and learned, and hopefully they can take those lessons into ACC play. So that's where things are. And in that dream world with just 3 losses and the potential of being able to do a lot of easy work in ACC play, Carolina would have been in our dream scenario at another maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 seed. And that's tough. As it is, Carolina 7-5. That's back to the real world now. And have a great shot to make the NCAA tournament. They've already got more quad one wins than they did in the regular season of 2022 when they ultimately made the national championship game. And that's a different team. This is a different team, but just in terms of quality of wins, they've already got more right now. All is not lost. All is not perfect, but there are big opportunities ahead. Now, Christmas time is a time of thankfulness where we just recall the things that, we're thankful for. Something I'm thankful for about Carolina, Coach Davis is utilizing his bench literally more than ever before and getting more production out of it. That's great news. And I'll give you the numbers coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about game time, man, going to college basketball games during the holidays is so much fun. There's just a different kind of energy in the room. People wearing like Santa hats and getting dressed up. And it's happy energy. I love it so much. I like taking my kids to it. A couple years ago, the first year CBS Sports Classic was at Madison Square Garden. We went to Rockettes. And for all of those kind of events, you can use something great like Game Time that helps you find tickets with some of the best deals for some of the best seats that you can. Game Time this holiday season, I love it, is focused on togetherness. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better. And it's the perfect gift. Short time. Christmas is tomorrow, but man, you can buy some Game Time right now. Hop on it. Maybe you want to get up to Boston this weekend, really quick, short turnaround, and go to the Fenway Bowl. Man, tickets, I found them for as cheap as $40. There's also, I love this, it's at Fenway. You know how you can sit at baseball games up on the Green Monster? There's tickets on the Green Monster, man. It's so cool. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? Oh, it's game time. All right, let's talk some bench usage and our Tuesday trivia answer. It's no secret. I've talked about it. Lots of people talk about it all around the nation and all around the Carolina fan base about Coach Davis's use or lack thereof of the bench. I think so much of that has been in bold relief because of how often and how frequently Coach Williams utilized the bench and his depth. For one reason or another, Coach Davis hasn't, whether it's a lack of trust or just the starters and main 6, 7, 8 rotation guys are just that much better than the others. And I can give you the numbers, and I'm going to here in a minute, both in terms of bench usage and Carolina's percentage of points coming from the bench players. Let's talk usage first, because it's kind of funny. At KenPom, you can go back and see what percentage of a team's minutes were played by the bench and where that ranks nationally. I keep up with all of Carolina's game-by-game bench usage data, but it's just nice also to be able to see it really quickly here. So, Coach Davis's first season, 21-22, 19.8% of the time he used the bench. That was 348th in the nation. The next year, 22-23, Carolina used their bench 18.3% of the time. That was 360th in the nation. That year, there were 363 teams in all of Division I. Last year, massive leap all the way to 22.6%. That was still 332nd in the nation in bench usage. This year, through 12 games, so it's a little bit more than a third of the regular season, Carolina is using the bench 33.8% of the time, getting up over 1/3 of the minutes played being by the bench. Now, a lot of pushback. Let me get out ahead of it before you even say it. Coach Davis has been changing around his lineups and getting different people in and off the bench. Sure, I hear that. That's happened some in other seasons as well. And also, guys that are coming off the bench are playing starters minutes. Let's look squarely at Ian Jackson, who played the second most minutes against UCLA on Saturday, 32 minutes, bested only by RJ Davis's 36. So Carolina, 33.8% of their minutes are from the bench. That's 178. Now, that's still not, wildly high, but when you compare 178 to 332, 360, and 348, that's a massive jump. And so Carolina, much higher in bench usage this year. And I don't necessarily want to be like at the tip top of the sport in bench usage. Like I want to have starters and a 6, 7, 8 that are really, really strong that you can depend on. And so I kind of like being in the hundreds somewhere with that. That's where I'm at. But what about bench points? Not just how often is the bench playing, but when they're in, what are they contributing? Well, that first season, 21-22, 17.2% of Carolina's points came from the bench. 22-23, it dropped to 15.7% of the points. Last year, a nice little jump up to 21.1% of the points. And then this year, exactly 33% of the points coming from the bench. So obviously it's going to be a direct correlation as the usage goes up. It stands to reason that the points would too. It's not always going to happen, but it is in this case. And I think this is ultimately good for Carolina. You look back to that national runner-up season where Carolina, I think, just they were done, man. Their legs were tired. That was the Iron 5 year. So I'm encouraged to see this, and I'm really interested to see as Carolina moves into ACC play, are there changes, or do we stay here at like the 1/3%, both in terms of usage and points? So that's something that you can track along with me at both bench usage and bench production. I think in a season where Carolina has played such a high-level non-con schedule, it's not like, oh man, we've played all these cupcakes, but now we're going to shrink the bench because we're playing a higher level schedule against the ACC. Frankly, a lot of the teams Carolina has already played are going to be more highly ranked than the majority of ACC teams. So in some ways, hopefully the ACC is easier than what we've already looked at. We'll see on that. All right, Trivia Tuesday. Let's wrap it up. RJ Davis is about to become the all-time leader in made threes, surpassing Marcus Page. Who are the other 8 behind them? Right now, Marcus Page in first place, 299 made threes, followed by RJ at 298. Let's go 3 to 10. In third place, Joel Berry, 266. So a nice little gap from those top 2 down to Joel. Fourth, Shammond Williams, 233. Fifth, Wayne Ellington, 229. Tied for 6 are both Donald Williams and Rashad McCants at 221. Dropping off to 8th with Coach Jeff Lebo. And you know what's funny? I didn't put his on here. Jeff Lebo, 211 made threes for Coach Lebo. 9th, Caleb Love, 200. And then in 10th place is Coach Hubert Davis, 197. So 3/5 of the coaching staff are on this list. How about that? Crazy, right? Marcus Page, Jeff Lebo, and Hubert Davis. All right, gang, that'll wrap it up for today's show. Thank you so much for joining me. Man, if you haven't subscribed yet to the show on both YouTube and audio, make sure you do that so you don't miss a second of Locked On Tar Heels. Help us get to 10 and 3, 10,000 YouTube subscribers in 3 years. We're like 500 away. We got 2 months to get there, man. Come on, be the next person. Thank you so much. If you haven't joined the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders or Discord, love to have you there. A great way to go deeper with the show, be even more connected with me. The links for both of those are in the show notes as well. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow on Christmas Day, a super fun show with Coach Pat Kilby and myself. Make sure you tune in for that. But until then, peace.